Hi, I'm Terry Kyle, the co-founder and CEO of WPX.net. And joining me is Kevin Ohashi, who is quite famous from his websites at reviewsignal.com and wphostingbenchmarks.com. And for several years, Kevin has been running a whole batch of performance tests of WordPress hosting companies. And tonight I'm going to put him in the hot seat and really grill him with some tough questions about his latest test results. So Kevin, welcome and good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Terry. It's nice to see you again.
Pleasure. So Kevin, to begin, can you dig into, from a customer point of view, which of your tests, because you do quite a few in the overall test group, you've got load testing, you've got uptime, you've got global average speed, all of these different tests, which do you think is the most significant for a normal kind of WordPress customer, a WordPress user using a hosting service, and why that particular one you think is really important?
So the interesting part of that question is the normal user part of that question, because my tests tend to be focused around the power user or the bigger users, people who care the most about performance and scale. But the average user is probably going to be the most interested in the more of the reliability metrics. The uptime, for instance, is my site online? They're not doing a lot of very complicated things, but their website has to be online and there to receive visitors. So that's probably the most important to everybody.
And you've been doing these tests for a while, Kevin, and it escapes me exactly how long it is. How long have you been running these annual tests?
That's a good question. I think I started working on the first one in about 2013, and it published in early 2014.
Okay.
So that's, what, 8 or 9 years now at this point.
Yep. And as I've said to you on a previous call, Kevin, I think it's quite an achievement that you get through all that data coordination and collation and figuring it all out without losing your mind or committing suicide each year. That's quite an achievement.
I mean, I might lose my mind a few times. I just hide it very well.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
It seems like a monstrous job. Do you actually have help with that?
No.
Okay.
I run every single test myself. There's nobody who helps me set up or do any part of it, as much as I would love for that to happen. My biggest concern with it is it's really hard to outsource something that is so critical and that I need to know everything was done exactly correct. Mm-hmm. And sadly, it's not an automatable process, because setting up a hosting account for every company and setting up a WordPress website, once you get to the WordPress itself, that might be fairly standard, but the process to get to having that WordPress site to begin with is not standard at all between any of the companies. You might have a different installer at WPX from a dozen different competitors. It's going to be a different process, and I need to make sure that every site is set up identically. Mm-hmm. And I don't have anyone that I could trust with that responsibility, and it also would take away, I think, some of the value of participating in the benchmarks, because one of the things that I work on and work with the companies that participate is giving feedback about everything. So from the sign up, the user experience, and I find more issues and bugs probably than most people. It seems to be a knack to break things. Mm-hmm. But I also try and look at things, if it doesn't make sense to me, and I've probably used more WordPress companies than just about anybody on earth, then the average customer probably isn't going to get it either.
Yep.
So I try and tell companies that and help them make more sense. And so if I don't keep doing it myself, the value that I can add in that dimension diminishes.
Sure. Yeah, that's an impressive workload. You'll see at this end, Kevin, I do get interrupted by the occasional cat because we have 10 cats at home here to go with the dogs. So don't be alarmed if I'm under siege from some cats.
How many dogs are
3.
there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Apart from the dog
Do you
shelter
also-
where we have 136 at the moment. Yep.
I was going to say, I'm shocked that the cats outnumbered the dogs,
Yeah.
given your background.
Yeah. My wife is a cat lady and she just can't stop rescuing them from the street. But we think we've passed through our limit at 10. 10 at 10 is pretty much enough now. Yep.
Sounds like my family
Yep.
growing up.
So, Kevin, across the years that you've been running your tests, do you see any trends, good, bad, or otherwise, across hosting companies, things that have changed quite a lot? Because that's what you described there. You're coming up on almost 10 years of this testing. So you might have seen a few things and changes in the hosting industry.
I mean, the most noticeable change is speed. When I started, the internet was slower, WordPress was slower, CDNs were slower. Everything has gotten faster now. We have pages loading, in milliseconds in some of these tests. You're averaging, 20 milliseconds for some of the fastest companies and delivering that around the world in these kind of speeds, which 10 years ago is probably unimaginable. I'm not even sure WordPress could fire off a request that quickly to begin with, let alone delivered to a customer. So the speed change is very noticeable. And the quality, I haven't actually checked this, but in my gut, I feel like from when I started in those earlier tests to now, there are more companies getting the top tier marks and not struggling with these tests. Whereas before, these tests put a lot more strain on the companies. And I don't know if that's everybody just getting better or if it's a self-selection filter of the companies that do well continue to show off that they are doing well and the ones that don't stop participating. I won't discount that possibility, but it feels like more companies are delivering a better experience.
Yeah, one of the things that surprises me about your test, because to my knowledge, I don't know of any independent speed test like yours on the web. I just don't see it. I haven't seen anything like that. And I thought most hosting companies would be queuing up to participate, but on the whole, they're not, because I think there are many hundreds of hosting companies still out there, or at least offering WordPress. Do you have a theory on that?
I have many, and some are more specific than others, but yeah, there are probably thousands of companies that say they offer WordPress hosting. I think most of them don't belong in my tests, if we're being quite honest. WordPress hosting gets used as a marketing term by a lot of companies, and it just means they have a WordPress installer and you can put a WordPress site on there, which is virtually every hosting company on earth can reach that bar. The companies that are actually going out of their way to add more performance and actually giving consideration to WordPress especially is a far, far smaller subset. And in that grouping, I would say there's a pretty decent representation in the benchmarks. I would imagine the number of companies that really do WordPress is probably under 100. Mm-hmm. And so we're getting somewhere between 30 and 40 companies, I think, this past year. I forget the exact number. So that's a pretty sizable chunk.
Okay.
But there are definitely notable omissions. And like I said in your previous question, I think one of the reasons is they don't perform well. And if you don't perform well, why would you want to show up in a test where you don't look good? unless you were actually going to dedicate resources and get better.
Yep.
And we do see some companies who have participated year after year, sometimes doing well, sometimes doing not. And I know a lot of those companies, if they keep coming back, somebody there tends to care about performance. And this is a way to measure it externally and try and improve it. I can imagine in larger organizations that could be difficult. Not everybody has the same interests and intentions, but if a company's participating over and over and not doing well, I actually think that's a good sign about the company and their intentions.
Sure. So we talked about where you've seen past trends like speed and general quality, Kevin, going. What about the future? At a certain point, that speed will, the improvements will be very incremental, I guess. Do you see any other future possibilities, future trends?
I mean, that's a very good question. One of the bigger trends I think we see is this more DIY or assisted DIY, as I'll call it. Traditional hosts, you sign up, you click a button or two, and you have a WordPress set up. They optimize, they do everything. What we've seen over the last, I'm not sure how long it's been, 10, 15 years, has been the rise of companies like DigitalOcean, which have targeted developers and opened up things to an audience that, Amazon has been there for a while. Amazon's A, expensive, and B, can be very complicated.
Yeah.
But companies like DigitalOcean, Vulture, Linode, these cheaper VPS providers created this ecosystem of very cheap access to resources that could scale and not scale. And once you have that, the developers stepped in, the companies have stepped in and built on top of them. And so you have companies like Cloudways, which lets you deploy on many platforms. And then you have all these companies like ServerPilot and Easy Engine, many of these scripts that let you set up on these kind of infrastructure providers. And that's kind of the DIY, assisted DIY I'm talking about. That seems to be growing, and these kind of open source, some of them products, is probably a pretty big threat for eating a larger chunk of the market from the developers that might have otherwise just signed up out of simplicity's sake. So that's an interesting trend to watch. And I think that puts the onus on web hosting companies, more traditional ones, to either step up in some other aspect. And for the most part, that aspect is support. I mean, the value most hosting companies deliver is when things go wrong or when I need help, or is someone else going to be there to fix it? And how good is that experience? Yep. So that's kind of the one big trend I see.
Internally today at WPX, we were talking with the guys about the impact of Canva, if you're familiar with Canva. So Canva...
Is that the image?
Yeah. So but they're broadening that now, and it's kind of like a Netflix all-you-can-eat, low monthly subscription for a massive number of like ad templates, like Facebook ads, Instagram ads, YouTube headers, Facebook headers, all of that kind of thing. And the interesting thing to me, or one of them there, is that you obviously have it's extremely simple to create pretty good looking ads quickly with their library, but they're expanding it to include things like stock videos, stock photos, background music, sound effects, and all of this kind of thing. But I come back to that kind of simplicity, a little bit like those Wix ads, which show or imply that it's extremely simple to make something look professional. And we were discussing kind of that possibility of a future trend for the web generally.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm trying to glance at the notes that I have about all these issues, and I have my benchmarks up. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is what you're talking about. And I probably should disclaim I am a Canva user and have a paid account there.
I have it. It's a great tool.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
It is shocking how easy some of these tools are. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with when DIY becomes easier, this whole ecosystem of tooling to make things easier pushes everything easier.
Yeah.
And like you said, Wix and Squarespace, I think some people would consider them hosting companies, and some maybe aren't going to consider them because, they don't fit that traditional model of you getting to, much control.
Yeah.
But what we've learned over the last 20, 30 years of the web is it went from the engineers just building everything by hand to everyone wanting this access and wanting it as simple as possible. And
yeah. I mean, I remember at university doing my bachelor degree, writing essays in WordPerfect 5.1 and using DOS, like DOS 6.2, and having to do DOS commands and things like that. And we've come like a million miles from all of that. And I think the thing about the Canva, it's a little bit like TikTok. If you look around, there's kind of a TikTokification of the web to some degree, like videos get shorter, articles get shorter, the attention span kind of goes down quite a bit. But Canva, to me, encapsulates that really nice simplification of what was previously, you had to go to iStock Photo for these photos or videos, and you paid for each individual one, quite a lot actually. They cost quite a lot of money, each video.
It's shocking.
Yeah, it's like huge money for all that stock photo stuff. And actually I see probably Canva, I think that Adobe move with Figma might have been to block Canva because they paid crazy money for that. And even now in Canva, they're starting to make it a bit more like a basic photo editor, basic video editor. Nothing sophisticated yet, like Photoshop or anything like that. But for most users, like non-technical people who just want to make some stuff and get some things moving, that's very, very appealing. And I think the other model we often talk about at WPX is that if you think about smartphones, the underlying tech is pretty complicated to run a smartphone and all those apps and all that stuff. But the actual user interface, like a 3-year-old or 5-year-old kid picks it up and can figure it out almost instantly and start using it. So on the front end for the user experience, I think that simplification is definitely probably the way forward. And I think things like Canva are kind of showing that for the general web.
I agree with you. And it is amazing how simple and straightforward we've been able to start making things. And it's impressive. But it has a downside, in my opinion, too, which is I think we lose a lot of that capacity for kind of thinking and problem solving because these experiences kind of take away from that. And it can be even more frustrating to learn because it takes so much to do it so nicely, so that if there's this massive gap between if I want to get started and try and join the ranks of people doing this, it can feel very frustrating. And I'm actually helping my girlfriend do her first WordPress site this week. Okay. We've been doing that.
That's a good experience to see fresh eyes on it.
Exactly. And it's incredibly frustrating because, she can look at these websites and, even the templates, the themes, yep. You look at them, they look so pretty. And then I think her natural inclination is this should be as easy as, Instagram or TikTok or whatever, that I should be able to just click a button, and that I should be able to move everything around exactly how I want, and that experience should be simple.
Yep.
And quite frankly, it's been anything but, and it is very frustrating, and I can see that being a barrier to wanting to learn and continue. So I think there is a big downside, and I don't know how you deal with that.
Yeah, exactly. So what about WordPress, Kevin? Your thoughts on where that is going, needs to go, should go, doesn't want to go, all of that in the future?
It's a big
Does
question.
it have a future?
I mean, given its size, it's going to have a future for a very long time. I mean, we finally, I don't know if, I haven't looked at any recent numbers. Maybe you have. I feel like within the last year, I've seen articles about WordPress's usage plateauing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's continued, or if it started growing again, or if it started to decline.
It's a slight decline, but the base is so massive that any decline could be temporary. It would take a long time to fade out.
And that's the thing, is there's so much inertia in WordPress that it's not going to go anywhere for the next decade, probably a few decades, just because of the massive scale. Even if it lost half of its users, it would still be, a quarter of the internet. And that would be a massive loss. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I think one of the problems with it is it's become a tool for everything. And tools for everything, at a certain point, either you have a monopoly and a strong lock-in for some reason, or you're going to get slowly picked apart by more specialized competitors in specific niches. Or maybe somebody comes along and does everything you do better and just takes your lunch. But for WordPress, I think there is going to be kind of a slow decline from 1,000 cuts of these SaaS providers and other groups. And I think that they would be targeting more of the beginner users with better experience, easier onboarding. And if somebody gets that TikTok, Instagram experience to build a website better, people prefer that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do some consulting, and I've done custom WordPress sites for clients, and some of them have switched more towards, Squarespace or some of these other competitors out there, because they just found it, the value from a whole custom built website just isn't justifiable for a lot of these smaller projects where it's easier. So yeah, I see a slow decline probably, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the web is still growing, so it'll be okay, but I can't see WordPress making major jumps at this point. It's just so big to get that.
Yep. They may well get swallowed up by Google. There have been rumors around that for a long time, that Google is sniffing around WordPress to buy them out and take it over. We'll see on that one. What is your view of Gutenberg and for WordPress? Was that a good move? Do you think it's well implemented? Is it helping or not? Where's that going?
I mean, I was not a fan of the way Gutenberg launched. The drama surrounding that seemed to be wanting more of a press timing than a actual good product. And I think it's slowly been improved over time, but I still don't like it. The first thing I do is install the classic editor personally. And I think some of these custom editors like Elementor, I think it's probably a better experience than Gutenberg.
Yep.
And there's Elementor and a couple other ones. And all the ones I've tried, the big ones, I thought all of those had better experiences than Gutenberg. So that's not great. It's sort of why is either that Gutenberg product needs to be as good as the best there is, or why are you bothering?
Yeah. For my own experience, I only use page builders. And the thing is, once you learn a tool, it's a big thing to have to go and relearn all over again in a different tool, like when Gutenberg launches or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're willing to put in the time to do that, great. I find Gutenberg tricky, and I just lack the patience to bother to learn how that works when I've gotten to use a page builder pretty effectively, and it's good enough. The page builder does almost all the things I want. They can be a bit buggy and obviously have heavy pages and things like that. But overall, it's all about the speed and efficiency of the outcome that you want.
I agree with you. As the end user, it's, can I do what I want in an obvious manner and as painlessly as possible?
Yeah.
And
I
don't feel like Gutenberg is there.
I think for me, it's a bit like iPhone 1.0. Like you can't have iPhone 14 without iPhone 1.0. And when it came out, it was probably amazing. I can't really remember when iPhone 1.0 came out. It probably seemed incredible, but today it's like a kid's toy. It's a piece of junk.
I think the problem is when the iPhone came out, there wasn't anything like it.
Yeah.
When Gutenberg came out, there was a dozen page builders already that were better. Yeah. And so that big difference does impact the way people see things.
Yeah. True. So Kevin, let's just race on to a few other topics. Content delivery networks, CDNs. What's your view on those?
I mean, in favor? Yeah, they're very useful. It's pretty amazing now that these companies like Cloudflare have locations virtually everywhere on the globe and can deliver your web page to a user on the other side of the world in a jungle, within milliseconds. Yeah. Versus the old system of I make a request anywhere in the world and it has to go all the way to my hosting company and back, and maybe back and forth a few times to load all the assets. So being able to do that, even if we have to send the first request all the way to the hosting company where it generates a page, the HTML gets sent, the CDNs, should have all the images and everything, so that at least that second hop is much quicker. And what's even more impressive to me is these CDN companies are not staying what we think of as a traditional CDN. I don't know how much you've looked at things like Cloudflare Workers. I probably should disclose that I do have shares in Cloudflare and really like the tech that they do and think they're pushing the edge on that quite a bit. Yep. And it's impressive to see things like Workers, where it used to be CDNs were just kind of dumb nodes at the edge. Now they're giving developers the power to actually compute on there, and I think they've come up with some storage as well, like almost database-like functionality, so you can start executing more and more complicated code at the edge too, not just serving an image and delivering that faster. So it's really impressive, and I don't think we've seen that leveraged in WordPress yet at any meaningful scale. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but one of the iterations of our own custom CDN that we're looking at and evaluating is that the CDN will act as an origin server optional choice for the user. So I think at the moment we have something like about 36 endpoints around the world. So an iteration of that would be wherever you are closest to any of those 36 endpoints, that can be an origin server location. And the rest of the CDN network just works as a normal CDN for your site visitors from elsewhere. So I think the key thing there for us is just about flexibility for the user, rather than the traditional model, which is what we have at the moment, which is 3 origin server locations, which is Chicago, London, and Sydney. That to me doesn't offer enough flexibility. So we're always thinking, what more can we get out of our CDN network? Because we can do whatever we want with it. It's our own thing, which is great.
Yeah.
We've just got to have the ideas in the first place, and then they need to be, from a dev point of view, technically executable. So we're working on a lot of that stuff, but also in backups, like additional backup security. We're evaluating a whole lot of options in that area. So, like you say, CDN has much more potential than just the old-fashioned way of doing it.
I actually, I'm not going to say worry. If I were Amazon or somebody, I might worry, because some of these CDN companies, and I'm specifically still thinking of Cloudflare, are looking at the hosting companies and are starting to look more like one.
Yep.
Being, once you've added the ability to execute code on the CDN, then you've added a database. We're nearly at this point where what is, if I'm running my servers on Amazon, I might start looking, depending on what I'm building, you might be able to build almost completely on Cloudflare and not that far. And if that were true, it could be running in, 200 locations across the world, where each one of them is acting like an origin, potentially.
Yeah.
And that could be pretty game changing. So if the CDN market is being pushed that direction, and with that sort of flexibility, it's going to be an interesting future. And I think WordPress is going to be pretty slow to adopt this, outside of maybe some very high-end custom work, like from some of the agencies. But if it does happen that way, like I see it looks like it's trending towards, eventually that will probably trickle down into WordPress as well. And maybe you guys with your own CDN figure out how to leverage something like that, or
we have a lot of
one
ideas.
of the bigger CDN players is also, if WordPress still 50% of the market, I am sure there'll be some innovation there.
The way we look at it, Kevin, is it's more like outcome as a service. So you want a certain outcome, just like with Canva that we talked about earlier. It's the outcome that you want as the user. How you actually get there doesn't matter that much. If it's fast, if it's efficient, and gives you the outcome with the flexibility you want, then that's really what matters.
Yeah, and that's why I don't see it coming to WordPress anytime soon, is these workers and edge compute stuff that a lot of the CDN companies are doing. That's very much in the heavy developer world. And it's going to start there, and it's going to be the tech companies doing custom stuff to start. But if it works out and the model works, it'll slowly come.
Okay, Kevin, next hot topic, caching. Some people say it's cheating if you're using caching. Some people say it's not cheating, it's optimization and it's efficient. Where do you stand on caching?
I would cache absolutely everything under the sun if I could. The only time it might be considered cheating is if you're delivering the wrong thing. So what I mean by that is, let's say I have a member site and a user logs in, user A logs in, they get their dashboard and whatever and can do what they need. And then user B comes and logs in, but you serve the same page for user A. That would be kind of problematic because they might be seeing cached artifacts of user A's, personal information or something like that, or it's not being customized. So if Facebook cached everything, everyone might get the same feed of mostly random strangers unless you happen to be the lucky person who logged in first. So for the most part, caching, you should cache as much as possible or make sense.
Yep.
But
Totally agree. Yep.
Cheating would only really count in more of a testing scenario. And I've had companies in the benchmarks. I don't want to say they were cheating. I think what I would say is the caching was too aggressive, and notice things like, the user pages seem to be cached. So that the wrong user, it was just caching like the WP admin page. So it would show whatever user first. And things like that can be caught and, be told, oh, your caching is too aggressive. You need to make sure that, these kind of pages don't do that.
Now, back to your tests, Kevin, because we've managed to talk about almost everything except your tests tonight. Not by design, just turned out that way. It's interesting to always chat. You probably, with so many companies, 30 or 40 companies in your tests, they might all kind of blur into each other a little bit, and that's understandable. But from our own evolutionary point of view, was there anything about WPX that you found you thought that could be better? Those guys could improve this or that thing?
I mean, it's a good question, and I can see your interest in that question specifically.
We always want to improve.
Yeah. I mean, from a performance standpoint, you guys have been earning the top tier marks in my benchmarks, I think, from the first time you participated, if I'm not wrong. On my little historical chart, it only shows the last 3 years, and it's all top tier marks. So on the performance standpoint, it seems pretty good. There's always room to get faster, and that was another interesting thing to see. I keep thinking every year that we're going to hit a performance plateau. How much faster can hosts really get? And, sometimes or I think last year, maybe in 2021, there was some areas, some companies, are averaging, 20 milliseconds. And you're starting to think, this has got to be plateauing soon, right? And then this year, I think some of the fastest speeds were sub 7, and you're like, I guess not.
Yeah.
And so, sure, it can be pushed that direction. As far as user experience, I'll be honest, that starts to blend together, especially when I went through it all. It's started about 9 months ago. I think we started in January this year. So
it's a hell of a lot of work.
I can't particularly remember, but if I saw anything while I went through it, I try and tell somebody.
Sure.
So I would have told you, or I think I worked with Alex.
Yep. A senior sysadmin. Yep.
Yeah. If I saw something, I would have probably just told Alex, hey, I noticed this, but I can't remember seeing anything that stood out to me as problematic.
Okay.
And that's mostly the viewpoint I'm looking at.
Sure.
It's not, how do I help a company be the very best. It's sort of, oh, I see a problem,
Yeah.
and that should probably be fixed.
Sometimes we're too close to it. We're just too in the operational details, and those fresh eyes, like your girlfriend with WordPress for the first time, you get reminded and you go, yeah, we forgot about that thing. That was stupid. We need to correct that.
Yeah. So do you do any sort of user testing or?
Yeah, we do, and a lot of surveys and all of that. But under the hood, we're making a lot of technical changes, more and more of our own code, our own development team, to give us that flexibility that we want. Yeah, really important.
Maybe I should ask an interview question here.
Yep.
Like, how do you see WPX evolving with regards to WordPress? What is the relationship?
Well, we don't have one officially.
When I say with WordPress, I mean the open source.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
So we have a number of top secret initiatives in the works, and I'm happy to tell them that then, Kevin, as you know, I'd have to kill you straight after the interview, to prevent that information coming out. But we are very, very interested in additional services that are hosting related but not hosting, that use hosting expertise but are not hosting. So over the next few years, we'll be launching a number of those things, which sometimes are, very close to hosting and, in areas like backup security, which is crucial. And I don't know if you recall, but there was a recent case in London when there was a record heat wave in the UK, and a Google Cloud data center, I think it's an Equinox one in London, went down for 17 hours. And the hosts in that data center were affected, of course, like that. And obviously their users were not happy about that. Everybody has downtime. Google has downtime. Facebook has downtime. Amazon has some downtime with AWS and all of that. So for me, one of the areas I'm personally very interested in and pushing the company into is additional layers of backup security for critical websites. And again, here's where the CDN might well play a big part in that. But I think if you have a site that it's really critical, and I'm not talking about the Pentagon or NASA, but it could be just an e-commerce site that's earning great money for you, for a little bit of additional cost, you have kind of bulletproof backup security on that. A lot of it automated, constantly checking that the site is live, things like that. Companies like Securi, which is a GoDaddy-owned company, and they have a big base here, support base here. I'm not sure they're doing an amazing job. There may be opportunities closely related to their work, things like that. So hosting expertise, some web security expertise will be probably branching into in the future.
That's interesting. And it's interesting you mentioned security, because one of the trends that I've been seeing in WordPress hosting space has been the massive acquisition sprees from some of the larger companies like GoDaddy and Liquid Web.
Yeah.
They're just gobbling up all of these companies, especially WordPress related companies, and a lot of plugin companies.
Yep.
As a hosting company that's a competitor to them, what are your thoughts on that?
We get approached constantly for buyouts, and we're always very polite and we say thank you, but no thank you.
I wasn't even thinking about you selling out. I was thinking about these hosting, a few hosting companies acquiring all of these components within the hosting space that your users might rely on. Like, how do you deal with that, or what do you?
So I think in any industry, consolidation is inevitable. Industries reach a certain point where the big players gobble up a lot of the smaller players. But I think the market is so vast in the web, generally, WordPress specifically, that there'll always be opportunities. And I think it's difficult for any single player, though they're trying, to massively take over one giant corner of the web or WordPress necessarily. And the thing for us, I think, and this is more about who we are as people, nothing to do with technology, we enormously value our independence. So we always want to be able to make our own decisions. We're completely bootstrapped. We've never taken any VC money since 2013. So good or bad, any initiative that we launch could be a disaster, could be a horrible flop. Some of them are. That's inevitable in business and entrepreneurship. What matters to us is just that freedom of not being an employee and not kind of being bossed around and told what we can do or can't do. Because we have a bunch of really creative, smart people in the company, including the two, the founding partners as well. So I think we'll always go for our independent path, and we'll just find new opportunities. And I think in the longer term, we'll be a software company that includes hosting, but we will also have a range of other products that we develop and launch and support ourselves.
Do you see or think about collaboration a lot?
Yeah, we do.
Is there other, there's more hosting companies your size than GoDaddy's size.
Sure.
Do you guys contribute? Is there open source stuff you guys work on, or is there any kind of projects that you guys collaborate on that you see as important to your existence? As are you maybe a middle-sized hosting company, mid-sized?
Yeah.
I don't know how you would.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to measure. We're 110 people, about the full-time staff, I think, somewhere there. One of the problems we've had, Kevin, here in this city, here, Sofia, Bulgaria, it's a massive tech center in Europe. So the demand for developers is crazy. It's a huge hub here. And when we see software developer ads, or when we run them in the past, we use other measures now, there would be a minimum of 500 other software companies advertising for the same position. So it's like crazy competitive. And my point of that is that the devs that we do have, we've got a team of about 8 or 9 guys. They are so, overloaded with all of our endless creative ideas and improvements and all of that, some of which I've talked about on this call, that outside collaboration is kind of just logistically, physically impossible at this point. Maybe in the future we can do more of that. We're always open to collaboration and joint venture projects, but so far, one that appeals enough hasn't really come along. But maybe in the future that would be the case.
Interesting. Yeah, I spend a lot of my time talking with people like yourself who run hosting companies, and it is interesting to see kind of how they view their company in relation to the market. And a lot of it seems it's easier to just kind of isolate and insulate yourself from a technology standpoint.
Yep.
And we're seeing, especially with the changes in like the control panel market, we're seeing bad partners. cPanel and Plesk have all been acquired by one company that is just unilaterally increasing prices on.
They're like 10x the price or something crazy.
Massive percentage of the companies. Yeah, I mean, the majority of companies use that software, and now you have effectively a monopoly in this little part, forcing that out. And so that's kind of watching this massive change of people like you having a development team and building your own products because of that. Fear of dependencies probably plays a big role.
Yeah, that's exactly why we never went down the Google Cloud server infrastructure path that you have with Kinsta, for example, and I think WP Engine and SiteGround are there now as well. So that's their choice, and that's completely fine. But we know if one day Google just decides to unilaterally triple the prices on all of that server infrastructure, their business model could be in huge trouble. So with our own servers, you're always dependent to a certain degree on other third parties, your co-location guys, your data center, network provider, all of that stuff can screw up. But we try to minimize that as much as possible and not be, too reliant. We own all our own servers. We buy them. We don't rent them from anyone. And we're always kind of buying the newest ones, highest spec possible, that kind of thing. So we try to always, like you say, isolate as much as possible. You can't completely, but as much as you can.
Yeah, you're trying to mitigate the risks as much as possible on partners.
Yeah, exactly. So Kevin, I've got a couple more questions for you. This one is actually the last two are completely non-technical, so you might find them less interesting. I'm not sure. Let's see.
Let's find out.
So I'm curious about, because I'm a creative guy. I'm not really a technical person. I'm a right-brained creative guy, writer, filmmaker, entrepreneur kind of person. I'm just sort of surrounded by a bunch of techie people all day. So I'm curious about this project of your test. You've been doing it for almost 10 years. How do you feel about it now? And, what's your relationship with this baby that you've created? And how has it changed over time? And do you still have the desire to keep doing it? How are you feeling about it?
If it was a Facebook relationship, it would be it's complicated.
Yeah.
It started out very much it was a bet, actually.
Okay.
That's how it started. It was a bet from the guy at GoDaddy who ran their hosting company or their hosting division that it was as good as anyone else out there. And I thought, really? And are you willing to metaphorically put your money where your mouth is? Because back then it was free. For the first few years, it was all free because I just use open source tools, and a load testing company sponsored it.
Okay.
And so there was no charge. So it was truly free, and I just wanted to see, is this really true? And I thought it would be an interesting one-off blog post.
Yep.
That's how they started. And the reception was immediate. People were excited. It was the most popular thing I had done at Reviewsignal.
Okay.
And I did a second one 6 months later. I published it. That's how fast the turnaround was, because every company in the specialized WordPress hosting said, oh, how do we get in this? Like, do us too.
Yeah.
And so I basically turned around immediately and collected everyone else who wanted to get in and did it again. And it, I think, almost doubled in size overnight. So it was really exciting at the start. And it was this new big thing. And now it's, almost 10 years later, as you say, and it feels like a burden and obligation.
Yeah.
It's expected every year. That's what everybody, come November, December, January, I start getting messages from consumers like, hey, is there a new one? Like, I'm looking at hosting. I want to know what the latest trend or data is. Like, is it ready yet? And that's what it's kind of become known for.
Yep.
And that was never my intention. And it sort of just took a life of its own. And it's less exciting now, probably. It's much more formal. The scale has grown. Back then, I think the first test had 6 companies.
Yep.
And so it was fairly manageable. It was 6 companies and 2 tests. I think I tested Uptime and ran. There was blitz.io was the service back then, and it would just, you click a button, you put a URL, click the button, and it gives you a chart and some data of, we hammered the server, it did this. So that first one was pretty easy. Now, I'm writing and publishing. There's open source scripts. So as of this year, everything is on K6, the load testing platform, and on Reviewsignal's GitHub. All the code is there. And I worked with Till from Object Cache Pro to build some of these scripts so that they can easily be modified, so that anyone who wanted to do WordPress benchmarking could take these scripts and do some of the basic functions and have a framework to do it. And that's a lot more work now. I'm writing lots of code to do this. I have to do, every company. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of tests. Yeah. So it's a different experience, and it's become a job.
Will you keep doing it?
I think so. Okay. I feel like I have to, and I've not seen anything coming even close to trying to replicate it. Or if I walked away, it wouldn't be like there's other things to replace it, and I'm not sure who would do them. And if anyone, I don't think any hosting company could do it objectively.
Yep.
It would always be suspect, even if you were the most honest and best intentioned and did it as professionally as possible. If a hosting company did it, it would be viewed through the lens of, So I don't see walking away from it.
Okay. Good for you, man. Well done. Okay, Kevin, let's go on. This is my mystery bonus question. So you might need to buckle up the seatbelt there if you have one on your chair. So let's say that Netflix decides to make a movie about your life. What actor would play you?
I think I want The Rock.
Okay. Okay. He doesn't seem that techie, but he's if he can read the lines and.
I was told that I have a resemblance to Maui in the Moana movie.
Okay.
Where he was Maui, so got the face and hair. So
all The Rock needs to do is just stare at the laptop really intensely.
It might be animated, just with The Rock's voice.
That could work. Yeah. Cool. Kevin, it's great to talk. I think we had a talk last year after last year's tests.
Yeah.
Good to catch up and actually talk about the web and WordPress generally and all those kind of things. So appreciate your time today. And did you want to add anything, to say anything more about this year's round of tests or what happened?
I would say go to wphostingbenchmarks.com and take a deep dive, look at the results, and give me your feedback. Because these tests, we talked about them a lot, but they're not static. They evolve every year and they change and adapt. And I look forward to engaging with the people who really care about this stuff and want to help make them better. So if you or anyone who watches this has ideas, my door is always open and I'm easy to reach. You can just put in my name in Google and you can find I'm on Twitter at Reviewsignal or Kevin Ohashi.
Yep.
You can reach out. You can go to reviewsignal.com or WP Hosting Benchmarks and there's like a live chat. If I'm at my computer and it pops up, it's me responding. There's nobody else, and I get some funny responses from that where people think I'm a bot, and nope, it's just me.
Yeah. Right.
I'm probably not there. Odds are I won't be there, but 1 in 3 chance I'm awake and sitting at a computer.
Yeah. And if you need a break from all that testing stuff, Kevin, you can just work on your screenplay of your life story, imagining The Rock playing you in that animated version.
Actually, I do have a fun, I don't want to say personal project, but new business that I am working on that's not hosting related at all.
Cool. Nice.
And it's, I'm working on a new website. My friend, I talked him into buying Portugal.com, the country.
Okay. Nice.
And so I'm building a country website, which is a lot of great fun.
Yeah. interesting projects make life worthwhile for me, and they're really thrilling, and it's great to just be involved in different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Kevin, I know you need to run, so thank you again for your time, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, as usual.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Bye for now.